everyone. This is Matt with ESI Survival Guide, an online resource to help legal professionals navigate the electronic wilderness. And we come out with new content every week. So please subscribe. And if you enjoy this video and find it helpful, feel free to give us a thumbs up, share, and comment. We are joined again today by a very close friend and regular guest on the guide, data privacy, cross-border transfer, risk compliance, and technology extraordinaire, Jonathan Armstrong with Cordery out of London. Hi, Jonathan. How you doing, sir?
Good to see you, and glad to see you're still in the GDPR after party.
Oh, you know what? I forgot that I still had my my birthday hat on. So for those of you that may be watching this video months or even years later, GDPR turned 3 today. So we are celebrating that on the guide. But Jonathan, I want to thank you for joining us today to talk about these two interesting Dutch DPA enforcement actions, the locatefamily.com action and the booking.com action. So let's start cutting a path, shall we?
Yeah.
So if I could kick off, let me give the viewers a little bit of background on the Locate Family action. Now, Locate Family is essentially a people search site, and they post names, addresses, numbers for what they say over 350 million people globally. Their tagline specifically says, find family, long lost friends, old flames, neighbors for free. And they have menus for folks that are looking for things like class reunion, biological family members, different ways that they can post search announcements and actually exchange public-facing messages. They've said in response to certain complaints on the Better Business Bureau site that they are a free service intended to bring people together in a positive way, not intended to inconvenience anyone. That's actually a quote from the Better Business Bureau site. But I do have to say, and we talked a little bit about this in the green room, if you will, that it is one of the sketchier sites that I've seen. I don't even know if I would ask our viewers to even go really check it out. But then again, I'm wary of all online data brokers and these people search sites generally, even if they do deal in data that's typically publicly available. But when you go to the site, essentially you jump into what looks like this chat board style interface, and it lists people's names, addresses, phone numbers, background reports, and the messages that they send to each other. And they state in their FAQ that they don't disclose the exact source of the data that they post because they consider their methods proprietary and trade secret. So also interesting to add to this veil of secrecy, if you will, it's not exactly clear where they're headquartered. And I know in the Dutch AP action, they didn't really cooperate that well in terms of giving information about where they're located. From my research, it seems to be based in Canada. But Jonathan, as we discussed, and as you mentioned to me in the green room, it's probably a little more nefarious than that. Their contact number has a Delaware area code. And then when you do an ICANN lookup on their domain, it's registered to Epic Inc. That's EPIK Inc. And the registrant, the administrative contact, the technical contact, they're all located in Bellevue, Washington, listed under Anonymize Inc., which is essentially a full service domain name registrar. And that registrar calls themselves the Swiss Bank of Domains. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing as well. When you look under their legal terms and conditions, they do say that they do not display confidential information. And they also say that they will not currently add or modify any information on the site because they have difficulty and cannot verify the identity of requesters. Yet there is a removal form for folks that want to go on there and try to remove information. Now, I was looking at some Reddit chats and some other things online. Apparently, when you go through this process, you have to supply photo ID. And for that purpose, a lot of people are saying that the removal process is actually a little bit more arduous than it seems on its face. So again, overall, one of the shadier websites I've come across. Interesting thing as well is not just showing the context of the communications and announcements for people trying to find people. They also oddly post a list of the denied requests for removal with names, dates, and other info. And then finally, and for all of the privacy professionals out there looking at the fine print, it says under their privacy policy that they do not redistribute information, email addresses, or information obtained from communications on the site to any third parties. Yet, if you go to their Twitter feed, it's basically everything on the site is redistributed on there. Oddly enough, I noticed after the Dutch action, there seemed to be an odd amount of folks from the Netherlands and Dutch citizens that were listed in the Twitter feed, which I thought was pretty interesting. So for all the potential GDPR violations that you could easily just pick out of your hat with Locate Family, this enforcement action by the Dutch DPA was pretty unique. So we can obviously establish that this site is certainly suspect. But Jonathan, what was this particular action about specifically?
Yeah, I think it is an interesting case, and I share some of the concerns that you do, and I've done my own domain name lookup, and I guess we have to say that some legit people do use domain name masking services, but it's quite unusual for it to be done on this scale, as well as the failure to appoint a data protection representative. I think you're right that there are probably other GDPR non-compliances as well. And what happened here is the AP, if you want the full name, the Autoritat Persoongegevens, and I'll only try and pronounce that once.
Yeah, I wasn't going to attempt that. I had it written out on a note card, but I wasn't going to attempt to pronounce that. So kudos.
I think it's the havens bit that normally gets me, but anyhow, so let's call them the AP, shall we? The AP seem to have some complaints against this outfit, and then they compared notes with other EU data protection authorities. And as many of your viewers will know, there is a sort of one-stop shop process in place under EU GDPR. But if you're an organization that doesn't have any tie to the EU, you're only under GDPR because of the extraterritoriality provisions, such as monitoring the behaviors of individuals within the EU, then you don't qualify for one-stop shop as such, and any data protection authority can put its hand up and say, we'll be the lead. And effectively, that's what's happened here. AP have investigated this on behalf of the DPAs in the EU, and they have decided that Locate Family didn't nominate a data protection representative. And this is a semi-obscure provision in Article 27 of GDPR. And effectively, it says if you're caught by the extraterritoriality provisions, but you don't have a presence in the EU, then you have to appoint a data protection representative who's effectively going to step in your shoes when people seek to exercise their GDPR rights as they have here. Now, interestingly, I think the AP seem to have limited their investigation to this. If I was them, perhaps they should have investigated whether the information provided under GDPR Article 14 was adequate, because it seems to me it wasn't, and whether the transparency obligations under GDPR Article 5 were also met, because again, I have concerns that an organization can crop up with no physical address and no real contact details. You know, how is that transparent? How is that dealing with data subjects fairly? And the AP have fined Locate Family €525,000 for their failure to appoint a DPR. And in addition, they're imposing a further penalty of an additional €20,000 for every 2 weeks that LocateFamily.com failed to comply, up to a maximum of €120,000. And again, as you said,
Jonathan, do you know, was there any precedent for that? Is this the first enforcement action of its kind to impose that type of ongoing penalty for failure to implement a DPR?
We've had ongoing penalty cases before in France and Italy, to my knowledge, where the fines can roll up on a weekly or twice weekly or monthly basis. And normally that comes with a list of remedial actions. So normally a DPA shall say, you shall do the following 6 things. And if you don't, then the fine's going to be X almost like a rental fee. So it's not new on an EU level, but I think it's relatively cutting edge for the Netherlands. I don't believe that they have done that in the past, although I may be wrong. There may be a hospital case that does that. But in any event, relatively new approach. I think we're going to see more of it. The slightly puzzling thing is that the AP don't seem able or not to say whether Locate Family have now complied with the order. Now, to be sympathetic to them, that might be because they could have complied by appointing a DPR in any of the 28 EU jurisdictions. So maybe the AP haven't heard back from some of those countries to see if a nomination has been made there. But I think it is an interesting case, and I think it does show that data protection authorities continue to have the extraterritoriality provisions of GDPR in their mind. And it's a real warning for businesses that aren't based in the EEA that you still have to comply with GDPR. Of course, the big unanswered question is, how is the AP going to enforce this fine? Now, there's some track record here with a pre-GDPR case where the AP or its predecessor were involved in fining Google, where they looked at assets that Google had within the jurisdiction, and in particular, advertising revenue that was coming through the Netherlands. So there's possibly a follow the money type way of enforcing this fine, but it's not immediately obvious to see how the extraterritoriality provisions in GDPR can be enforced, in particular, Article 27. But that'll be an interesting debate to see what progress we have on that.
And maybe Locate Family, based on the veil of secrecy, if you will, around how they're organized, maybe they'll end up selecting Slovenia as their place to designate their DPR. It's still the one country that doesn't have their GDPR legislation in effect. So
yeah, and that's right. And we can speculate as to who's behind this site, but they look at least familiar with English terminology that would be used towards the east of Europe. Let's just say that. So somewhere along the Russian border might be an attractive location for them.
Sure. And I should also say, too, based on our discussion, make sure that you all read the disclaimer. These are Jonathan and my opinions only and for educational purposes. So one question I have, I always love to discuss the UK elements of these issues with you, Jonathan, for obvious reasons, but also you're an expert in all things UK and EU. Prior to Brexit, in the UK, if I was an organization, I didn't necessarily have to comply with Article 27, obviously because it's part of the EU. Now that there's no adequacy decision, even if we are making headway for the UK to have that designation, what do I do if I'm a UK company? Do I now have to designate an Article 27 representative for any actions that I'm doing, data processing that I'm doing in the EU?
Yeah, that's true. So, and the same in reverse. So if you're a UK-based entity and you're caught by the EU GDPR extraterritoriality provisions, you probably are going to have to appoint a DPR in the EU. If you're an EU-based entity and you're caught by the extraterritoriality provisions under UK GDPR, you probably have to appoint a DPR in the UK. And if you're not in either of those camps, so let's say you're a US law firm and you're caught by the extraterritoriality provisions of EU GDPR and UK GDPR, then you may need to appoint a DPR in both the UK and the EU.
So simple,
it is
simple.
Exactly. And yeah, so it is. They are quite complex provisions, and I think the fact that we're starting to see some enforcement will remind people to scurry away and try and look who an appropriate DPR might be. And one other thing to mention: you appoint on a per entity basis, not a group basis. So if you're the Acme Corporation in the US, but you've got Acme UK and Acme Luxembourg Limited, Acme US probably still needs to appoint a DPR, although it probably can appoint Acme UK as its UK DPR and Acme Luxembourg as its EU DPR. So some complexity to it, but it's important to get it right, because this is one of the areas where we can expect data subjects, individuals, to use as a basis for their objection to fair processing. That has a whole host of other GDPR consequences.
So other than the Article 27 DPR, are there any other takeaways that you can provide our viewers from locatefamily.com?
I guess the other one, and you've mentioned it already, is scraping isn't processing as a defense. That's bunkum. That defense, will not work in a court. And saying just because because it's in the public domain, it isn't personal data or it isn't subject to GDPR is just nonsense. That we have had cases on that already. One of our favorite, and it's very difficult to pronounce, but I'll give this a go as well, is Alco Koba versus Balvinda Sambi. It's, as you probably know, Matt, it's a case over the rival methods of operation of tow bars to tow caravans and trailers. And it's a hugely exciting case for the towing community, but also for the data protection community as well, as it looks at just that point. If I gather data from the public domain, is it mine to use as I want? And the UK courts say, no, it isn't. You still have to follow proper data protection principles.
We can conclude on that. I mean, that's one of the things in their FAQ. Locate Family relies heavily on the fact that a lot of this stuff is out there publicly available. And I know in the US, really, if something's in the public, we essentially say you have no rights, privacy rights to any of it. That, of course, is not necessarily the case in the EU, which is a very important distinction. And